p.m.
Thank you. I call into order the April 17th joint meeting of Glendale Housing Authority and City Council. May we have roll call for City Council, please?
Council members Agajanian,
Present.
Devine,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Sinanian.
Here. And for Housing Authority, please?
Authority members Devine,
Here.
Garcia, Garpetian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Razian,
Here.
Sinanian,
Here.
Chair Agajanian.
Present.
The agenda for the April 17, 2018 joint public meeting of the City Council and the Housing Authority was posted on Friday, April 13, 2018 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Before you is Director of Community Services and Parks regarding fiscal year 2018-2019 proposed annual action plan for community development, block grant, CDBG Emergency Solutions Grant, ESG and Home Investment Partnerships Act Home Programs, and redirect CDBG funds from canceled CDBG projects. 1A is a resolution adopting an environmental negative declaration. B is a motion approving the action plan, authorizing the plan submission to the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, authorizing the city manager to move excess canceled and unused program funds with CDBG advisory committee approval, and authorizing redirection of unused and pre-designated funds to other projects and recommended by CDBG advisory committee.
Yes. Hi, Maggie.
Good afternoon, Mayor Sinanian, members of the council, members of the Housing Authority. I'm Maggie Kavarian, Senior Community Services Supervisor with CDBG. Each year, the City of Glendale receives formula entitlement funds from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, to administer community development block funds, block grants, emergency solutions grant, and home housing programs in the community. The plan's program priority this year continues to remain consistent with the 5-year consolidated plan adopted by Council and the Housing Authority in April of 2015. The program priorities include social services, neighborhood improvements, capital projects for community facility improvements, housing, and homeless services. On November 7th, 2017, the City Council and the Housing Authority approved the proposed CDBG funding allocation plan based on estimated funding that we'd be receiving in fiscal year 18-19. An RFP was issued on November 17th based on that estimate of $1.6 million. The CDBG Advisory Committee had a full-day meeting on February 23rd of this year to review the RFP submittal proposals, and they interviewed the agencies and made their recommendations. A public hearing was also scheduled on March 22nd at Pacific Park Community Center, inviting the public to hear the proposed recommendations and give their feedback. Staff is here today asking Council and the Housing Authority to approve the funding allocations and the recommendations. In the beginning of the year, staff estimated $1.6 million in CDBG entitlement funding based on last year's entitlement funding. The figures will most likely increase slightly this year due to the President signing the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2018, which increased HUD's core entitlement funding. We anticipate the actual allocations from HUD in the coming weeks. We estimate $1.6 million in CDBG entitlement with an additional $89,680 in the canceled and returned Door of Hope flooring installation project, which the CDBG Advisory Committee recommended go back to undesignated community projects. The Emergency Solutions Entitlement Grant is a 2-year grant, which is allocating $147,970, which is the same as the current fiscal year. And the entitlement amount of home funds in 18-19 is estimated to be $905,510 for affordable rental development, new construction, and acquisition and rehab program. So the breakdown of CDBG funding is as follows. $320,000 is going towards program administration. $240,000 is for public social services projects. $489,680, which includes that Return Door of Hope money, is for undesignated community projects. And $640,000 is for pre-designated city CIP projects. We had 8 social services agencies submit RFPs, and all 8 were recommended for funding. 7 are currently receiving funding in this fiscal year, and 1 new agency has been considered and recommended for funding, which is the GIFT program from All for Health, Health for All, for their youth and teen program providing behavioral therapy and counseling services. We had 8 capital improvement project proposals that were submitted from 4 community agencies. 6 CIP projects were recommended for funding. Homenetmen Auditot chapter with 5 submissions had 3 projects recommended, which were the gym divider for the main campus at $26,287, security camera installation for the North Campus for $47,950, and security camera installation project for the main campus at $38,209. The Armenian Cultural Foundation, the Glendale Youth Center, has a solar panel project which was recommended at $219,537. Adventist Health Glendale Live Well Senior Center windows renovation project at $65,000. And the YWCA of Glendale Sunrise Village Emergency Shelter for garage conversion and backyard irrigation system project was recommended at $92,697. All 4 agencies were recommended for funding. There are 3 pre-designated city projects, which include $370,000 for the homeless housing project, $232,000 for Section 108 loan repayment for the Essentia Homeless Center Access Center, $38,000 for Pacific Park Playground and Pool Shade Structure project, which was transferred from the Car Park Shade Structure project. In late November, CDBG staff conducted a technical assistance workshop with prospective agencies explaining the RFP process. Staff read and reviewed 16 submitted proposals and gave feedback to the agencies regarding strengths and weaknesses in a 1-page synopsis. The reviewed proposal packets, along with the synopsis, were then delivered to the CDBG Advisory Committee for their review. So on February 23rd, the CDBG Advisory Committee had a full-day meeting to interview agencies, deliberate, and make those funding recommendations. And again, revisions to the proposed plan. There was a redirection of $89,680 from the canceled 2016-17 Door of Hope flooring project, and we redirected $38,000 from pre-designated city project Car Park to the Pacific Park shade structure. So to recap, all current social services programs were recommended for funding. 2 CIP proposals were not recommended for funding. Reprogrammed funds in the amount of $89,680 were given to undesignated projects. And then funding amounts are estimated based on last year's estimates. The President signed the omnibus bill on March 23rd of 2018, which includes an increase in CDBG entitlement funding for 2018-19. The numbers will be available at the end of April. We ask that the City Council and members of the Housing Authority approve to adopt the environmental negative declaration for our capital projects, approve the proposed 18-19 action plan for CDBG, ESG, and home, authorize the city manager or her designee to move excess, canceled, or unused program funds under $50,000 from one project to another with CDBG Advisory Committee approval, redirect $89,680 from canceled Door of Hope project to undesignated community projects, redirect the $38,000 in fiscal year 18-19 Car Park shade structure project to the Pacific Park Playground and Pool shade structure project, which are both pre-designated projects. That concludes our PowerPoint presentation. If you have any questions?
Yes.
Mr. Rajendran.
My question is, in my opinion, we are not reaching to all nonprofit organizations, those who deserve to get help from our city. I mean, same nonprofits, year after year, they come forward and they collect money, which I'm glad. I wish we would have more. But somehow we have to reach other nonprofits, those who deserve to get some money to continue their work. So I want to see how you reach to these organization. They have to come forward, or we write a letter, or we inform them, since you have to do for the next year, and reach them why we don't start now, that they can fill up application or whatever they have to do to start doing it, to pinpoint what they need, what the needs are, and come forward.
Councilmember Alajanian, we actually send out the RFP in November, but before that, what we can do, and we can start that as soon as possible, is do outreach and let the community members and the nonprofits know about CDBG and what the offerings are of CDBG. So we can start that as soon as you like. We'll be more than happy to do that.
So Maggie, why don't you cover how the RFP goes out? Who does it go out to? How do you do that outreach piece today?
Currently, we have a list of nonprofits that are in the Glendale area, in the community, and those that have applied before for CDBG funds. We send out letters. We send out notices. It is placed in the newspaper, in the Glendale News Press. It is placed on our city's website. And what we do is we send out an email, and we post it. So we have to do that. That's part of the HUD guidelines. So we do that currently. But what I'm understanding is you want it done sooner, and we can do that. We can do outreach and marketing even sooner than that, and get people, probably get people understanding that they can start thinking about it and planning for CDBG funds now.
And the reason I want to be reached that sooner is because those who never received money, they don't know what they have to do. So it takes them some time to get the right path to reach you or to get the money. So we have to start early.
And we have a technical assistance meeting in November, and what I would suggest is probably have one in the summer as well to get people started and thinking about CDBG funding. So that's something we can consider.
Thank you.
If I can chime in on this, and just going back to my CDBG days, we used to have a lot more applicants, and I think we used to have a lot more recipients of these social services funds. And I don't know that the level of advertisement or the level of exposure to these social services organizations has necessarily dwindled or it's dropped. But back then, what was increasingly a serious problem for these entities in making their decision to apply was the amount of money that they would receive. Since the amount of money, the pot got smaller and smaller and smaller, the amounts that we gave out to individual groups got smaller. But when these groups did the sort of the cost-benefit analysis of putting in the time, the effort, and paying the insurance and getting back a very small amount of money, a lot of them just simply walked away from CDBG funds. And I think over time, the result that we have is a reflection of that. Entities don't want to apply for a grant that gives you maybe $10,000 and have to insure at $6,000 for that. It just doesn't make sense.
I know that when I was in the nonprofit world, it became more expensive to apply for CDBG funding and receive it, and more because it was more paperwork, more staff. Everything became more expensive, and then the amount of money that you got was inconsequential. So I agree with Councilmember Sinani and Mayor.
Excuse me. Maybe we have to, since some of this organization for a long time they're receiving money, maybe we have to reduce the amount which are receiving and pay attention to those who never received money and they have to spend lots of money to put the documents together to apply. So they deserve to get more money more than what they have to spend.
Maybe they do. And again, going back to the CDBG days, I remember that staff also, so there's a lot of oversight involved with administering these funds and making sure that they're used properly, used on a timely basis. Staff kind of has, over time they develop their own favorites, the organizations that they have, they have experience working with. It's not like, it's not nefarious in nature, it's just practical. And as a result, you do get these experienced social services groups that year after year apply for funds and are granted those funds. And so there's several factors working into this.
And I can add another comment, the more thinly you spread the money to more organizations, the less organizations receive, the less they can do. So I think what we're looking for is bang for the buck, so that people, the services, organizations that get this funding have enough money to make an impact on their organization. Because if we give more to more organizations, funding goes down, they can afford less. So I think that's another consideration that we used to make when I was involved.
That is true, because they have to meet their outcomes.
Right.
But maybe we can, if there are no more questions for staff, unless there are, we can hear from the CDBG board members, and their chair, I assume, is here.
Our chair and our vice chair are both here.
Great, and maybe we can ask them those types of questions. What do they consider when they make these decisions, and how they've reached this decision today?
I have a quick question before
Maggie?
Maggie. What percentage of CDBG fund goes to social services, and what percentage goes to capital improvements? Overall, is there a policy for it, or?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 20% goes to the administration, and 15%, which is the
That's us.
staffing, yes.
Okay.
And 20% goes to the 15% goes to the social services projects, and we have it right here, sorry.
So 65% goes to?
65% that goes to capital improvement.
Okay, thank you.
How much of the funds go to the so-called pre-programmed carve-out that the city has out of the CDBG?
640,000 goes to the city.
And what percentage of the total funds is that? This is, by the way, every year we go through this, so we're going to do this again.
30%.
Numbers?
About 30%, roughly.
About 30%.
Okay, so we'll talk about that. I'm sure you'll talk about that too, Ms. Ramirez and Mr. Armenian.
Good afternoon, Mayor Sinanian, members of the council, chair, staff. We're here to answer your questions.
Questions?
So that 30% does not include that 20% administration fee, or it includes that 20% administration? No?
No.
So 50% goes to the capital improvement projects for the city, and, okay.
Yeah. So there's some pre-designated programs. One of them that I'll highlight, for example, there is the Community Services Homeless Housing Project that every year we've been setting aside money with the intention that a property would be bought in order to have a homeless shelter. One thing I'll highlight there that we've discussed is that as we've been trying to save money, the real estate market has been escalating, as some of you well know, having been in the business. And so one of the comments I've made is we need to decide, I think, as a city, where we want to go with that, because we can keep trying to save, but while the real estate market continues to appreciate at a pretty rapid clip, your efficiency of trying to save for that is getting away from you, because we're setting aside money, but meanwhile the values of real estate are going up. So I think just trying to fund that sort of project, hoping that enough CDBG funds are going to accumulate over time, I think the market will continue to outstrip us unless there's a big downturn at some point. So that's one thing to highlight, and that's $370,000 this year that we're pre-designating, and we've been doing it. I think this is the second year that we're doing that. So something for your consideration on that sort of pre-designated. The other thing we've been trying to do is we've asked community services to also come forth with projects such as parks that benefit a wide number of people in the community, so that we can also designate some funds there. And so that's what you're seeing here, is that with the Door of Hope money that was returned, part of that, we've taken part of another park project that didn't need those funds, and we reallocated them into the Pacific Shade structure. We are, to Councilmember Agajanian's question, I think we do strive to highlight the same things in terms of outreach. I think staff does quite a bit of outreach in their process. But the reality is what Mayor Sinanian pointed out, which I think at the end of the day, we have decided that it's just not efficient for organizations to just get a small piece. For example, there have been organizations that just get 10,000, which is not worth it to them because of the amount of reporting that is required. Many of these agencies also, by the way, leverage our CDGB money, and then they go get county money so they can accumulate different sources of money in order to really make the programs work. Because these amounts typically don't make an entire program turn for the amount of people that benefit from the program. But more outreach is always needed. We always ask about it. We try and make it multilingual as well. I think the process, I agree, is a complicated process. Once people think that the city council just decides and money comes, they don't realize all the reporting, all the application process and the reporting behind it that is necessary in order to remain qualified. But in spirit, I think the CDBG council agrees with doing outreach and trying to reach more organizations. The reality is when organization sees how much is involved, they often don't have the staff or the right kind of skill sets within staff to actually go and do this sort of thing. So they often have to contract grant writers or things like that to meet the requirements. This year we got a little lucky in a kind of a weird way. Door of Hope did not apply for funds, and so that gave us a little bit of a cushion to bring someone else in, which is the All for Health, Health for All program. That's a first-time designee in terms of social service. And then a new recipient on the capital side is the Glendale Youth Center. They got original dollars many years back when they were first building the youth center, but now have come with the solar program. One of the things that we've tried to emphasize there have been multiple organizations that came in with solar programs. We tried to put in some requirements, which Glendale Youth Center is meeting, that says, well, if you're going to take savings through this capital investment, how are you going to reprogram that savings so that people benefit from it at the end of the day? Because people don't necessarily see a benefit from utility savings. So we tried to define that benefit, and Glendale Youth Center has come back with multiple programs that they intend to fund with the utility savings, such as a food bank, the blood drive, and after-school program that will be open to all children regardless of culture. And that way makes the facility available to the entire city and benefits the entire city. I don't know if there's anything else I missed.
He's done an excellent job. Can you tell he's been on board for quite a while?
He does this for a living, doesn't he? You wanna say something?
I have a question. I can go ahead. When is the deadline for the applications? When is it that they have to submit the applications?
In December, I guess, yes.
This year, the deadline was December 28th
For this,
for this RFP
So
period.
for-
It's usually always at the end of December.
so is there a time that they have to submit before this? I mean, how many months prior to December they can submit their
So
application?
the RFP is issued in November of 17th, and then they have until December 28th to submit the proposal packet.
So the RFP is based on the amount of funds that we have?
Correct, the estimated funds that we have.
And why is it that short? Because from November to December is less than a month
I think
almost.
it's the HUD timeframe, and then what we do is we go off of their schedule, their calendar.
Explain it to me one more time. What's the hot time
The
frame?
HUD timeframe is because what it is, and I'm going to have Armina Honanian come up because she's done this many years and she does the quarterlies and the monitorings. And what that is, do you want to come up? Because she can give you that timeframe.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Housing Authority, and Council Member Ms. Garabedian. So what happens is we need to Brown Act and go through the process. and it takes time for us to publicize it. And when the HUD releases the funding, we typically have to do a public hearing. And we get the assessment, the comments from the public, then we initiate the RFP process. We go through the RFP process, and it takes time to go through the process of review of the application and getting responses from the agencies and going through the advisory committee, then ultimately bringing back to the council, getting approval, then going through the implementation process, then starting the projects July 1st. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, and we start our new fiscal July 1st of each year. So at a certain time frame, we also have to go through our projects, meaning we have to close our projects, we have to monitor all of our agencies and close them out and open the new projects. So there's a very tight time frame that we go through in order to push our projects and our agencies to comply and also to start new projects. So with that said, we have to give them about 30 days to bring in their application. But before that, we do have technical assistance with all of our agencies. And when we also put a notice out in the LA Times or Glendale News Press, if they have any questions, we do answer as staff. So we get a lot of calls from public if they're interested. If they have any questions, we do answer them. So, but as far as the main time frame, as long as I have been with the city, we usually release it, the RFP in November, and we get it end of December. So we meet all of our deadlines with the review process and then ultimately bringing it to you guys in April so we could start the project.
So they can prepare the applications prior to November, get it ready, so when the RFP is out, they can submit it right away. But prior to that, they can get assistance from the city to fill out their applications. But one other question, let's say we approve these projects today, do they have a time frame that they have to complete those projects? Is it, because I noticed you said it's
yes, the fiscal year, yes, current projects will end June 30th of this program year. So
these projects have to be completed by June 30th?
Of next year, 2019.
Of next year, okay.
So we close this current projects that we're in already. But what you're looking at, you're trying to find the 2018-19. The 2018-19 fiscal year starts July 1st of 2018 and will end June 30th of 2019.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
And as I might understand that you keep a track of or accountability for the projects to make sure that they're happening, that they're being completed, worked on during the year.
Yes, Councilwoman Devine, yes. We have 4 quarterly reports with all of our agencies. Each quarter, they provide all the numbers served and all the outcomes that are measured within each program. And each springtime, usually April or May, staff will go out there and monitor all of our agencies that are currently being funded. So we check to make sure that their outcomes are met, total numbers are served, and the expenditure rate is up to date. If they fall behind in spending their funding, then we do work with them to ensure and to make sure that they are in compliance. HUD has strict guidelines. Just want to make sure that the council is aware that whoever goes through the CDBG funding, they have to have an applicant information form. So every person that walks into our agency's door, they have to have an applicant information forms. We generally collect 10 to 20% of income verification for each participant within each agency. So they have to be low and moderate income. We have to have 60% Glendale residents. It's very tight guidelines that we follow. And the expenditure rates, if they don't use the money, the HUD will take the money back from us each fiscal year. So we have to ensure that all of our social service project fundings are completed by June 30th of 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So going back to, you can sit down. Going back to the pre-designated funds concept, CDBG commissioners always have a tough time with that because they're dealing with small amount of money amount of money that appears to dwindle every year. It decreases. And, I think we made progress a couple of years ago when we stopped funding South Glendale code enforcement with CDBG funds. It was kind of a practice that the city had engaged in for a long time and almost inexplicable, but it fell within the definitions of HUD's, CDBG funds usage, and we did it. Now, these funds were diverted, from what I understand, to the homelessness housing project. Is that correct?
From the CDBG?
From the code enforcement, South Glendale code enforcement, it's not like they went back to the general pot. They're still pre-designated, but now they're pre-designated for a homelessness housing project.
They're actually part of that, yes,
Yeah.
that is correct.
And which brings me to my next point. This is great, what we're trying to do, what we're attempting to do for our homelessness and helping out Ascensia. What I don't understand is why the residents of the city of Glendale are paying $10 million a year into Measure H, and we're getting $300,000 of that?
Approximately,
Approximately.
yes.
So we're paying, again, our residents are paying $10 million into Measure H every year. We're only getting $300,000 back. And on top of that, we're having to take monies from other very scarce sources like CDBG funds to fund homelessness projects, which is, I think, exactly what Measure H should have been funding in the first place. Something fundamentally wrong with the way Measure H is structured. It's treating our city and our residents totally unfairly, and we need to, I think, I don't know. I certainly, this is going to be an issue for me. We need to do something about it. This is not right. It's a lot of money to be paying into something and getting nothing out of. It's absurd. We're paying 30 times more into Measure H than we're getting back. That's just not fair. But that's it. Thank you so much for the work that you've put in, Ms. Ramirez, Mr. Armenian. If my colleagues don't have any more questions, we'll go to a vote. But before we do that, I know how much work goes into this, and at least back in the day, it was pretty heart-wrenching because you're sitting there and these are all great programs, really good organizations. They all do really good work. They really come out and put on a good presentation of what it is that they do. And in the end, we were stuck with what we had. The amount of money is the amount of money, and you have to somehow distribute it fairly and intelligently in a way that gets the greatest, bang for the buck. And I'm sure you've done it in this case. I've reviewed it. I'm happy with it, unless my colleagues have other comments.
Just one question. When you were on CDBG, I think the funding was about $4 million.
It was probably 3 times more
Yeah,
than
now it's half of that. It's really crazy.
A lot of, so even then it was painful, but the number of applicants was 2.5 times more, 3 times more.
Okay.
And the recipients were accordingly more.
I just, if I may, Mayor, just thank the members of the CDBG committee. I know these are tough decisions for you as well. When you're working with not a whole lot of money and you're trying to really make it impactful in our community, it is a tough job. And I thank you for the hours that you put in, because I know you do visitations and meetings, et cetera. So we just know that we appreciate staff, your time that is put in, and we appreciate as well all of the organizations that are receiving this grant funding. So thank you for all you do in our community as well.
And before we take that vote, we do have a speaker. I'd like to invite her up. That's Natalie Kimura. How much time do you need, Natalie? 3 minutes?
3's good. Thank you. I'm Natalie Kimura, Executive Director of Ascensia, and I also wanted to thank the committee and the staff for all their hard work on this program. It is a difficult and challenging one. I just wanted to also add to the context you were giving historically around this program. It has been 5% cuts year after year after year. We're coming in for a $20,000 request for outreach. It used to be close to $100,000 that would come in CDBG money to pay for an outreach team. There used to be 3 full-time team members here operating in the city of Glendale. We have a team of 2 half-time. Hopefully with Measure H funding, we'll get a little bit more, but I share your concerns about that, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But I think that if you want to make this pot bigger, you've got to push on your elected officials in Washington around the value of CDBG. It's been characterized as a widely exploited program. It's been characterized as patronage. And so that's been the justification for making those cuts year after year after year. The other thing to also point out is just that, so the organizations you're concerned about is that there are guidelines that require a certain alignment of activities with the HUD goals. So this isn't super easy money to get in terms of trying to fit into what the HUD outcomes are that are desired there. We also, from Ascensia's perspective, are very grateful for the city stepping up and supporting the $2 million that was matched by the S.H. Ho Foundation to have our facility at Tyburn Street. It's a wonderful home for us. We're actually bursting at the seams. We'd love to grow and expand it. But without that $2 million commitment from the city, which you are now paying through the CDBG funding, we wouldn't be there. So I want to also thank you for that. In terms of Measure H, we would love to figure out a way there. 80% of our clients come from Los Angeles. We support people who are homeless in Los Angeles. We don't really get money in a meaningful amount from that or from Measure H at this juncture. And I think it is a conversation worth having to see how we can do a better job of establishing more equity, if you will, in terms of access to funding through Measure H. So I just wanted a moment, though, to thank you and to clarify our role and experience here. It does feel like year after year we get this funding, but to me it is a statement that the city cares about addressing homelessness, and for that I am grateful. It helps with our planning to know that there is a fairly stable source of funding that we can count on for outreach services, and we're pleased to be able to provide that service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. Nice to see you. I'm glad we were able to help out at least a little bit with Ascensia. So I wasn't aware that, I know that the budget has been impacted from Washington on this program. But one of the abuses that you mentioned is patronage. What are they? What's the complaint on patronage?
So my understanding is in the very early years when the Appropriations Committee was looking at the question of what to do about CDBG funding, there were allegations that some communities were using CDBG funding in nefarious ways. And so the idea of local control and administration, which was the selling point of CDBG in the first place, suddenly became something of, this sort of instrument of corruption that I'm not sure was really borne out. There's probably one example in one city in America where that might have been a case. I don't know how widespread it was. But year after year, you have been seeing an acceptance that it's okay to cut CDBG funding. Right. And the cumulative effect has been, what are we, like 20 years into 5% cuts? It's been significant. So there's that. On the ESG side of things, the cuts that we've experienced are more about policy priorities. So some of the money that had been going for shelter, it was determined that shelter wasn't the only thing that money should be paying for. So the city has been forced to put some of that money aside for rapid rehousing. So when we were getting $98,000 for our shelter beds, now we're down to $49,000. And we've had to look for money elsewhere. And then we also, of course, got a cut from redevelopment, but that's state money.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. Yes. Natalie, this is unrelated to the CDBG funding, but earlier we had a speaker, Ms. Ramirez, who was talking about no place to take a shower. Do we have places in Glendale that are available for those people that are on the street to come in and shower and get cleaned up?
So the clients that work with our outreach team are allowed to use it. We have a shower downstairs if you've been to our building. And so our outreach clients do come in. They can use the laundry facility and the shower. We don't have shower hours, for example. It's not like a public shower in that regard. But anyone that's working with us for services at Ascensia, we can bring in and they absolutely can use a shower.
But they have to be your client?
Yeah, they do need to be working with us. She said she was at La Placita. I made a note to contact a friend of mine who has the Showers of Hope, which are mobile showers. There's also Lulame, so I'll find out whether there's something out in that vicinity that would be safe for her to go to.
Would that be something that we would need here in Glendale, or our numbers are not as great?
I would argue the homeless count numbers are going to come out, but I'm not really certain that you have the level of need that might justify that. But we're open to having a conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to address the point you raised, the inequities. No, it's sort of a general statement. The inequities on the Measure H funding model. Of course, we were asked to vote for it before we learned what the procedures and regulations were. But at the San Fernando Valley COG, there was an effort, a movement by the cities of Glendale, Burbank, Santa Clarita, and San Fernando to object to the county administrator on the basis of the minuscule local return that we're getting. And that motion to send a letter, a comment to the administrator was quashed by the county representatives. So,
The supervisors?
well, by their representatives. The supervisors were not present, but they sat and they said, no, we don't want to hear that you're not happy with the distribution that you're getting, despite the fact, and the point was raised, that Glendale is its own continuum of care, and we receive many, many folks from outside of the Glendale city limits into our programs. But they don't want to, they're not in the mood to get any opinion or advice as to how to adjust their procedures.
Well, if I may, you know, when I was chair of housing, I was asked by Supervisor Barger to come down before the supervisors to speak about this very issue, and the fact that we in Glendale felt that we were being punished for the good work that we were doing by the county not being able to justify giving us more money. And it seems that if she invited us down there, me down to speak on this, that I'm surprised that if her representative was one that was opposing any kind of change. But I think it would do us justice to maybe have our housing director contact her again, and let's make our voices heard again.
Yes.
And I agree with my colleagues. I think this is a lesson for us to learn, not to support new laws that are coming out. They're open-ended, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be before we know what it is. I mean, this is what happened to us. Like SB 1, 50% goes back to the communities. And with this measure, it was just approve it today, we'll decide something tomorrow, and we'll be fair, and this is what we get. So.
And so on top of sort of the fact that we do take care of homeless that are coming from other places, which is fine, we have a population that's facing a really, really serious housing crisis. I mean, folks are being priced out of their homes. We have tens of thousands of people that are potential homeless at any given moment. They are potential homeless. So for these large amounts of money to be paid into a pot, which does not come back to us in any meaningful ratio, it's just fundamentally unfair. So I think we have to stand up to it. We have to stand up for what's right, and whatever it is, through the through the supervisors or whatever regional bodies that we have that we can cooperate with our neighboring cities, make it right. But we just shouldn't be okay with this.
Okay. There are no other.
Yeah, please.
I'll second your motion.
So we have a motion and a second, and we'll take roll call for City Council first.
Council members Agajanian,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes?
Najarian,
Yes.
Garpetian,
Yes.
Mayor Sinani.
Yes, for housing.
That was just for council. They're both for council.
I'm sorry?
It's only council.
It's just council?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, what's next on the agenda?
We require motions to adjourn for the council and one for authority.
Do we have a motion for council?
So moved?
Second.
Do we have a motion for housing
Housing.
authority?
So moved.
And we're adjourned at 4:04 p.m.